you're watching Left, Right and Centre, I'm Nidhi Razdan. The big focus at this hour, Indian students who have been advised to leave Ukraine's second largest city of Kharkiv by the government of India. They had a 4-hour heads up and they have just 30 minutes left before that deadline is up. This is an advisory that was put out by the Indian Embassy in Ukraine just 4 hours ago, just under 4 hours ago, where they wrote in capital letters that the situation was deteriorating fast and that Indian students and all Indian nationals there had to leave immediately, including by foot if they had to, in order to reach 3 specific points that the Indian government had asked them to reach. Now, these are locations that are anywhere between 11 and 14 kilometers from where these students currently are, and it's not as simple as just getting into a car and driving there. This is a war zone. Students we've been speaking to over the last few hours have described to us that there is shelling and firing that is going on. They are obviously not getting into taxis or private cars. They're not there. They're just simply not there. And it's not that simple for them to just walk all the way to these particular points. We'll bring you the very latest on this effort to get Indians out of this city. And the reason why this has become urgent, as the government of India said a little while ago, is because there were inputs from Russia that they had to evacuate Indian nationals immediately. It's clear that the Russians are planning a big offensive in Kharkiv, and they are already there. They've been there since this morning in large numbers. They've already been shelling Kharkiv in the last 24 hours. Remember, Indian student Naveen also died in Russian shelling in Kharkiv just yesterday. And government officials here are now telling us that most of the female students who are in Kharkiv, they have managed to exit the city. There are a number of male students still, however, who need to be evacuated and to move out of there. So we in fact do have Neeta, my colleague, joining us for more on that. Neeta, we understand that in fact there is some kind of a safe passage that the Russians are providing for Indian nationals, but you know, this is a war zone and clearly a lot can go wrong as well.
Yes, Nidhi, but you know, a lot of background negotiations are going on between India and Russia. That's what our sources are telling us. In fact, you know, Russia is helping India to evacuate its nationals. As per the latest information which is there with the government of India, now it is that Kharkiv is now virtually under the Russian control. Russians, in fact, have avoided the areas which were asked by Indians, that because their citizens were, moving from those areas, so they avoided those areas. That's what we are being told. In fact, all girl students have been evacuated from Kharkiv and they are on their way to western border by train. Some of the boys have been left behind. However, now, you know, they're also trying to pull them out also. Another interesting information which is coming from to NDTV from the government sources is that Russians are trying to give Indians a safe passage. As of now, already 17,000 students have landed in India as per Operation Ganga, but whosoever has been left behind. As far as this Kharkiv is concerned, we are also being told that, you know, Russian paratroopers have landed there, so virtually it is in their control as of now. That's the latest that we are hearing from our government sources. Nidhi?
All right, Neeta, thanks very much for that. And as we've been pointing out, the difficulty really has been for students or anyone really to get from point A to point B, the point B being where the government of India would like Indian nationals to get to. There's just simply been very, very difficult circumstances for people to just get from A to B. So the Indian advisory was really quite something, because there were a series of them that came out, 3 of them, in fact, in a span of 45 minutes or so earlier this evening, in capital letters, clearly conveying the urgency of the situation, saying that, you know, Indian nationals should leave Kharkiv, walk if they had to, and that deadline for them is till 9:30 p.m. IST. That's about 6 p.m. local time there in Ukraine. Now, what reports are saying is that therefore after that, the Russian shelling of Kharkiv is expected to intensify. It's expected to be very heavy shelling. And in fact, that has in a way already started, because there have been reports of shelling. Students have been telling us about that, and those reports have been coming in consistently. We're going to go across to Jyoti Hire, who is in the capital Kyiv, and she's been reporting for NDTV all these days. Jyoti, what are you hearing now from Kharkiv, from there? We're just going to try and get Jyoti back. We've lost the line with her. But as we've been saying, that Russian shelling had already begun in Kharkiv. As Neeta was saying as well, Russian paratroopers were seen there this morning. So they have almost pretty much taken control of this, the second largest Ukrainian city. There are other assaults that are underway in different port cities as well. And we can go back to Jyoti Hire again in Kyiv. Jyoti, if you can hear me, what are you hearing from Kharkiv, first of all?
Yeah, the situation there is dire right now. We talked about the kids have to get to Pisachin, Babye, and Vladivivka, and all of these are 12 to 16 kilometers away in the suburbs of Kharkiv. And the way to get there is basically over major roads that normally it would be something that you would take a car to get there, take the highway to get there, not walk there. So that in itself is difficult. It's really cold. It's snowing. They're carrying luggage, and the time is ticking. There's 20 minutes left until this deadline hits. And as far as we know, after that deadline, there is going to be some sort of operation in Kharkiv. I mean, in fact, there's been an operation in Kharkiv all day today.
Right. Jyoti, any word at all on how many Indians are possibly still stuck in Kharkiv in particular? All right, I'm afraid we've lost that line. I believe we have it back. Jyoti, if you can hear me, any numbers at all on just how many Indians are still stuck there? All right, so we're going to try and get back to Jyoti in just a little bit. But again, to bring everyone up to date, there is a deadline for Indian nationals to get out of Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city. This comes after the government of India says they got inputs from the Russian government. They didn't want to elaborate on that on the record, but it is understood that the Russians have pretty much taken over the city, and they are going to be undertaking heavy shelling here after 9:30 p.m. IST. So they have given India a very small window in which to warn its nationals to evacuate the city of Kharkiv. Government officials saying that in fact, a number of female students have been able to exit Kharkiv. We will have to try and speak to students ourselves to confirm this, but that's what the government is claiming here. As we said, just a few minutes to go for that deadline, an extremely difficult situation simply because there is no transport. It's not like these students can just walk out of their hostels and just flag down a taxi. This is a war zone. There are no cars. And as Jyoti was explaining to us, the areas where they have been asked to go to, even by foot, are in the suburbs of Kharkiv. They would normally have to take a car to get there. And if you look at these maps that we're showing you, they actually give you a sense of where the students actually have to go. In some cases, they would have to walk 2.5, 3 hours. That is, if they walk at a brisk pace to get there. And it's not that simple. Shelling is already underway. There is a very tense situation there, and we're going to try and bring you the latest in just a moment. But let me just go across to our guest this evening, India's former ambassador to the United States, Meera Shankar, joining us this evening. Derek Grossman, senior defense analyst with the RAND Cooperation, Fred Weyer, Russia correspondent of the Christian Science Monitor, and Mr. Yurash, who is actually Ukraine's youngest member of parliament, is joining us as well this evening. Thank you to all of you. Mr. Yurash, just to get a sense from you about how serious the situation is today, it looks like Kharkiv is going to fall to the Russians very soon. How worried are you about Kiev being next?
First, Kharkiv has been shelled heavily, but that only means the situation for Russians and their desperation to take over the city. They having no other instrument to take over the town as they wanted to. They are trying to shell the city to basically destroy any resistance there. Resistance is not abating in Kharkiv, and numerous tank columns have been already destroyed in Kharkiv. And they will continue to be destroyed in Kharkiv because, again, Kharkiv is not just a city in Ukraine. It is a very powerful city, a very big city, and plenty of people there are taking up arms to resist the invaders. I'm sure Kharkiv will just fall as it is described. Kharkiv is in the battle which will resonate around the world. As far as Kyiv is concerned, I'm in Kyiv. We're preparing defenses in Kyiv. The reality is Russians are making incursions in the town, some of them very large ones. I have been in shootouts in the city. The reality is even there, Russians have been repulsed and their invading forces destroyed. We are trying to push them out of the outskirts of the city in the west and in the south to keep the supply lines open. We are managing to do that quite successfully. And Kyiv at the moment basically is preparing for battle for that big Russian column which everybody's talking about.
And from what you've described, clearly there are sort of multiple fronts that have opened up. We know that the Russians have advanced in a couple of key port cities today as well. Just give us a sense of how locally people are pushing back. There have been some incredible pictures of people coming out and just resisting the advance of Russian troops.
I'll give you the memorable image just coming out from Enerhodar. It is a city with a nuclear power station in the south of Ukraine, where part of my family actually lives. And their citizens have went out in the streets and tried to push back at the Russians with bare hands. Russians have thrown grenades at them, shot some people. The videos I saw had a guy who lost his legs with a Russian grenade thrown into civilian crowd there. Russians are facing resistance at every level. There have been images of grandmas going on the street waving Ukrainian flags and pushing back the Russians. Villagers going out and pushing out the tank that came into the city. Again, Ukrainians are resisting as a whole. Our nation is defined and clear. This is our land, it is our country. We will not let Russia do as it likes. Everybody in this country, from everyday citizens to members of parliament and members of government such as myself, we are taking up arms to resist Russians in every way imaginable. Because again, we are not letting a country fall.
Well, it is incredible the kind of resistance you and all your countrymen have put up in this very difficult time. Ambassador Meera Shankar, just wanted to come to you on the concerning situation at the moment regarding Indian nationals, particularly in Kharkiv. How do you see the situation and sort of the back channels that are currently open between India and Russia to ensure a safe passage? It is a war zone, so how much of that would actually play out in reality on the ground?
It's very difficult to say, and it's an extremely difficult situation on the ground. The positive thing is that the Indian government was able to notify the students and to advise them in advance that they should vacate Kharkiv, which is going to be the site of intensified conflict, and that in discussions with Russia, some arrangements have been made for safe passage of these students. Of course, the situation on the ground is so bad that transport is not available. The students will have to make their way to the places where they are supposed to gather which are quite far, willy-nilly on foot, and that can be fairly dangerous. So it's a very, very difficult situation, and we have to wait and see how it goes.
I think that's pretty much sums it up. Wait and see. Derek Grossman, just to come to the wider question then of what the world is doing in order to sort of take action against President Putin and Russia. All these sanctions that have been announced, they don't seem to be deterring him at the moment. They don't seem to be getting him to change his mind about which way this is going to go.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, but I also would agree, or I would also say that it's kind of early days at this point, right? We're only about 6 or 7 days into the conflict. The full force of the sanctions have not necessarily taken effect yet, and we'll have to see how this plays out over time. And so, I was listening very closely to President Biden's State of the Union address last night, and it was, the first half of it was pretty much all about Russia. And so the focus from the United States on Russia right now is like a laser. And, in joining with allies and partners, in particular with the NATO countries, I think Putin is going to see diminishing returns to this this conflict, to this foray, if you will, pretty soon.
Right. Before I come to Fred Weyer in Moscow, I just want to go across to some Indian students who have managed to join us live with great difficulty from Sumy University, which is a couple of hours from Kharkiv. And Anju, Susan is there with a number of her classmates. Anju, just tell us, how are you guys doing? What's happening around you where you are?
Now we are in the hostel right now, but we can hear the explosion sound, firings here, gunshot and all. But now for a time period, we are safe, but we don't know till what time we will be safe. And our contractor talked to the Indian embassy and they are telling that within 1 to 2 days they will evacuate us. But we have a shortage of food and water. We don't know how will we survive here for more days.
Anju, location-wise, where are you all exactly? How far are you from sort of the nearest point where you could potentially exit from there?
We are in Sumy right now. From the border, they are told it's like 18-hour journey, and now that's not possible for us.
Just 40 kilometers from the Russian borders.
For us, the western border is away from us, like 1,200 kilometers away from us. The only option for us is to travel through the eastern border, that is through the Russian border. It's like 2 hours from Sumy, and we haven't had exact plan how to get there. There is no trains or vans available, and the bridges have been broken down. So for us, at the moment, we are stuck here.
How are you guys managing without, I mean, as you said, you're having difficulty getting food and supplies. How are you managing?
We have purchased for a week of food at the day of the attack, and the supplies are running out. So we need to find a solution as soon as possible. Otherwise, there's going to be a problem for us.
And are embassy officials helping you at all? Are you able to speak to them regularly?
Embassy speaks us through our contractor, and for him, he got the information within 2 days they're going to evacuate us, but still we have no plan how to get to the Russian border. So it's a very risky thing.
So you've been told basically to stay put for the next couple of days?
Yeah. We are waiting for further information.
All right, well, guys, good luck and stay safe. What else? I don't know what else to say. I mean, I know it's a very difficult hour, but you guys are together, and here's hoping that you do get out of there safely, and I think you should. So just hang in there, okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, bunch of Indian students there. It's really very difficult to see them in this situation. It's so scary for them, for their families. Fred Weyer in Moscow. What is the end game here for Putin?
That's a good question. I think that the military situation has to be resolved one way or another before we hear about that. The Russians say, and I'm just telling you what I get from the Defense Ministry, that they are conducting a major pincer movement in the east. They say that they're bypassing major cities other than Kiev, and that their goal is to cut off the main Ukrainian army in the Donbass, to encircle it, and then destroy it. That's the operation that they say they're carrying out, which would suggest that there wouldn't be a big assault on cities like Kharkiv, but their tactics can change, or they can be not telling the truth. I don't know. I sit here and I read dispatches from both sides, try to make sense of them. And frankly, it's like following events that are occurring in two completely different universes that have only the place names in common. They're just two totally different narratives emerging, and you can take your pick. But if Russia wins, I mean, if they can force Ukraine to basically surrender, which I think is what they want, I don't think their goal is to occupy the whole country. In fact, they say it's not. but it may be to partition Ukraine, to create one or more. They already have two statelets, pro-Russian separatist statelets. They might want to expand that in order to keep Ukraine basically hamstrung.
Right.
But that's a political goal that only will follow military victory.
As we speak, and there's so many things happening at the same time, from the students that we're worried about at the moment. There's also, Ambassador Meera Shankar, the UN General Assembly, which is currently, we're going to vote, in fact, any time now, on a resolution to condemn Russia for this action. Now, here is another chance for India to make its views on this aggression known. Is there any scope of India shifting its position from an abstention to actually voting with this resolution and voting against Russia? We've lost an Indian national just yesterday.
I think that a lot would depend on the language of the resolution, but my expectation is that we will stay with abstention, but make explanatory statements where we will make it quite clear that territorial integrity and sovereignty of states must be respected, that violence is not the way forward, and that violence must cease, and talks and diplomacy offer the only way to try to find a solution.
But one does wonder, Derek Grossman, whether India is in danger of actually being then on the wrong side of history. This sort of invasion has now taken on completely different proportions. Can India afford to sit on the fence?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that I think India has been on the wrong side of history here. I mean, India abstained in the early morning of Saturday there in India to a UN resolution condemning Russia for invading Ukraine. And then a few days later, as part of the Human Rights Council of the United Nations, voted to abstain to a resolution to discuss the human rights situation in Ukraine. So, I mean, that is kind of contrary to India being a democratic country that wants to uphold the rules-based international order. And I think it's caused a lot of concerns in the United States. And you also got to look at the other side of it, which is I understand India has a long-standing relationship with Russia dating back to the Cold War, but Russia really is not India's friend. And I think increasingly we can make that argument pretty easily with the available evidence. I mean, just look at China-Russia relations these days with President Putin visiting Chinese President Xi Jinping for the opening ceremony of the Olympics a few weeks ago. And the two said that, their relationship has no limits, quote unquote. Meanwhile, India faces off against China along their disputed land border in the Himalayas. And India's relationship with Russia has not dampened the China-Russia relationship at all. There are many other examples as well. I mean, you can look at Pakistan. Pakistan just sent their prime minister to Moscow for the first time in 23 years, and it looks like Russia-Pakistan relations are set to incrementally improve. And that has been lubricated in many ways by China.
Absolutely. In fact, we saw a shift even in the Chinese position from an abstention to actually clearly voting out and out with Russia at the UN Human Rights Council regarding that particular debate that you mentioned. Fred Weir, I just have 45 seconds. If I could ask you very briefly, at what point do you think that these sanctions, which actually have been quite swift and well coordinated in the West, at what point could these sanctions actually hurt Russia?
Well, they're already hurting Russia, and a lot of Russians are suffering from the immediate impact, although they have been enduring escalating sanctions for 8 years, and nobody ever made money by betting on the inability of Russians to withstand deprivation, But I think that Russians are feeling it already. But I doubt very much whether any level of sanctions is going to change the behavior of the Kremlin.
And I think that is the key question, something I'm going to try and explore in the next half hour or so. Thank you very much to our panelists for joining us as this story unfolds with new developments pretty much every minute. Thank you very much to all of you. And before we go, just some quick feedback that we're getting from our viewers on coup this evening on this big story. Akshit has written that the West has provided military aid, but is it enough for Ukraine in the long term? While Nivedita has asked whether it is possible for Ukraine to win this war without the help of the West.